Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 9th session of the series Teaching Online. It's about teaching, not technology. My name is José Manuel Villafuerte, and I'll be with you today as a moderator, along with your host, Regional English Language Officer, Dr. Ruth Petzold. We will try to answer your questions and respond to your comments during the session. And if you like something that our participants say, please feel free to give us a like or use one of the Facebook emojis. Today, our host, Dr. Ruth Petzold, will be talking with our presenters, Wendy Colson and Cindy Spoon, about teaching middle and high school online. Over to you, Ruth. Let's get started.
Thank you, Jose Manuel. Welcome, everyone. We're really happy to have you join us for this series of webinars created with Mexico in mind, but we think it's also helpful for those of you joining us from other countries. It was designed to help get us through the pandemic, but we hope it will also be useful in the future if we discover we like teaching online. I'd like to remind you to like the Relo Mexico page on Facebook in order to get news about upcoming sessions, as well as resources and tools for English language teaching. Today is the 9th session of our series, and as you can see on our calendar, during our 2 remaining weeks, we will be exploring topics such as working with middle and high school learners remotely. That's today. We'll also talk about teaching university students virtually, how to do assessment and evaluation online, and exploring watch parties and American English resources. If you've been with us before, you know you'll get great ideas and resources from our experienced panelists. We'd love to know whether this series has helped you to adjust to teaching virtually. Please let us know in the comments. You can feel free to mention a particular topic or a particular resource or activity that you liked. As always, here's what to expect today. As every Monday and Thursday in our sessions, it will last about 60 minutes. It will aim to help you feel as comfortable teaching in your new virtual classroom as you were teaching in your physical classroom. We'll have one presenter, sometimes supported by a second panelist, and I will make sure the presenters hear any questions you might have, so do put them in the comments section. As Jose Manuel said, please feel free to share your reactions to the webinar by using the Facebook emojis or put a comment in the comments box. And now for today's session, which is teaching middle and high school online. As always, we'd like to start with a warm-up question. What is one way teaching adolescents is different from teaching other age groups? If you'd like to share your answer to that question, please feel free to do so in the comments. You can also just think about it. So in today's session, we'll talk about ways to tailor your online teaching to this special group. Specifically, we will be applying global frameworks to blended learning. We will create student-centered activities, or we'll talk about how to create student-centered activities that focus on collaboration and engagement, and we'll identify the needs of low-level learners. And now I'm pleased to introduce or reintroduce our presenters, Wendy Colson and Cindy Spoon. First, Wendy. Wendy started her career in TESOL in 1993 after receiving a master's in applied linguistics and TESOL from Indiana University, a career which first led her to work with the Soros Foundation's professional teaching program in Hungary, where she taught for 4 years. She then taught ESL to adults in community-based programs and worked as a program coordinator and then manager for Chicago's tutor-supported adult literacy program. She then changed directions slightly, got a master's in K-12 bilingual education, and moved to Mexico, where she's lived for 16 years. She worked 7 years teaching children in private bilingual schools, and then became a teacher, trainer, and curriculum developer. Simultaneously, she served as a U.S. Department of State English language specialist in Jordan, Tunisia, and now virtually here in Mexico. In 2017 and 18, she was a State Department English Language Fellow in Colombia, working with teachers in their Young Learner and Youth Leadership Scholarship programs. Recently, she's created workshops and materials for the National Program of English, PRONI, in Toluca. Currently, she also works online with British Council, mentoring teachers from Myanmar, where she spent the first few months of this year. Our second presenter today is Cindy Spoon. Cindy has spent 35 years working in the field of international education. She has a master's degree in intercultural training and advising from the School for International Training, and a master's degree in TESOL from George Washington University. She has worked in higher education as a director of international student programs in nonprofit organizations, both as an advisor to parents on cross-cultural issues and as an educator in a refugee resettlement program. In 2017, she served as a U.S. Department of State English Language Fellow in Chile, collaborating with teachers of English to strengthen their curriculum and teaching methods. She currently lives in Maryland near Washington, D.C., and works in public education as a high school ESOL teacher. We're very happy to have you both back, Wendy and Cindy. Over to you, Wendy, for the first part.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Well, we can see here on this slide that some of your challenges for teaching adolescents online at the beginning of this series dealt with actual understanding, attention and motivation, how to get your students to connect with the class, and what the best use of technology is for remote learning. So we hope you will find some solutions from Cindy and I, and also from the other participants during our hour together. Oops. See here? So here are some general characteristics of adolescent learners. We know that they are discovering their identities and are increasingly interested in getting involved in the outside world. They are able to step back and grasp abstract ideas. We see that even though they do benefit from structure, they are on their way to more and more independent learning based on relevant content and self-expression. So how can we take these ideas and create lessons that engage and challenge our students? Cindy will introduce us to frameworks that will help you do just that.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to see you back at one of our webinars. I want to start with this question. How many of us were asked this question when we were children? What do you want to be when you grow up? Our answers may have ranged from doctor to astronaut. It seemed like our end goal was just to finish the requirements for this degree or that certificate, so we could say we were now a fill in the blank, teacher or astronaut or doctor. But I think a better way to phrase this idea is, how do you want to contribute to your community? This asks a question based more in the present and not a distant future. And it allows young adults to see that they are building skills right now that will serve them the rest of their lives. And we know that many of the jobs our students will have in the future don't even exist today. How many of us thought to say we wanted to be online teachers when we grew up? Or we wanted to be a photographer who uses a drone? Or we wanted to design cars that drive themselves? So we need to teach skills our students need today and into their future. Skills like critical thinking and problem solving, which is an aspect of creativity that nurtures their individuality. So let's look at two frameworks that can guide our curriculums to address these needs. 21st century skills. Even though we are well into the 21st century, these skills are still a powerful guide for us to use in our teaching focus. We can see that the learning skills blend well with that description we just saw of an adolescent learner. Critical thinking needs to be highlighted now at this age because they are ready for more abstract concepts. Creativity connects to their need to be challenged as they learn about who they are and what they enjoy. And collaboration and communication are skills practiced through pair or group work at a time when they want to be spending more time with their friends and peer groups, both in their communities and around the world. And this particular image of 21st century skills includes two other categories. The literacy skills speak to exactly what we are all doing right now. We're learning about new technology and interacting with news sources to learn about the world. My colleague Heather, in the previous webinar, just gave a great example of an activity that teaches critical thinking around the use of online resources. Our students need to be really smart, savvy consumers of the media. And we can build in visual literacy and media literacy components to our lessons. And the last category here, life skills, speaks to the character traits that we want to develop in our students. So let's take a quick look at another framework for designing our lessons. This framework looks at similar skills, but presents it in the context of global competence. So let's start up here in the left corner. It says investigate the world. Students investigate the world beyond their immediate environment. So this is also just that aspect of creativity and using media resources wisely. To the right upper corner, we see recognized perspectives, both their own and others. And this definitely connects with the idea of collaborate with others by listening to and understanding different perspectives. In the bottom corner here, it says take action. So put their ideas into appropriate actions to improve conditions, improve their communities. So again, be productive citizens and problem solvers. And the last corner speaks to communication ideas. Speak and write clearly to be understood and listen carefully to understand others. And before you start to feel overwhelmed by all these ideas, remember, many of you are already teaching these 21st century skills and these global competencies. We look at these today only as a reminder of how we can continue to expand and deepen our lessons little by little. So let's take a look at several teachers and how they are creating lessons that use these skills and competencies. And we will look at ways to add to or change some aspects to fit the needs of our adolescent students. Wendy?
Great. Well, our first teacher, and I know she's watching, is Wally Fernandez. Wally says this about remote learning. I have become closer to some of my students now that we are working one-on-one. Now, she works one-on-one through WhatsApp with her students because she was not able to do any synchronous learning during the shutdown. But in spite of the accessibility challenges, she planned some engaging activities for her students. Let's take a look at two of them, which illustrate some of the skills and competencies Cindy introduced us to. These are tongue twisters and travel itineraries. So we know that tongue twisters are fun and also a great way to practice pronunciation and find out what sounds can cause problems, especially when said 3 times real quickly in the English language. Now you might be wondering why the middle school student in the picture is wearing a mask. Well, Wally first sends out a video file with an animated tongue twister. However, she first wants her students to concentrate on listening, so she asks them to put on a mask. Now this is fun for them, and she says that they are more motivated to do the activity remotely this way. Then her students can watch the video to get the meaning. Next, she has them send her a WhatsApp audio recording of one of their first attempts at repeating the tongue twister, has them practice a number of times, and then send in their best attempt. Wally knows that when her students are motivated, that they will practice. And if they practice pronunciation, they will feel more confident speaking to the wider English-speaking community, which is a 21st century skill. Although Wally uses WhatsApp, Vocaroo is another great way to produce speaking assignments. This tool is easy to use and allows our students to listen to themselves before they send in their recordings. Now, by introducing them to another tool, they gain more confidence in their use of technology. Their ability to differentiate between features of different technologies is also a 21st century skill. Travel itineraries was an activity that caught Wally's students' attention from a distance. Now, this is how Wally sets up this assignment. She sends her students information about different travel destinations or lets them choose one, depending on what materials they might have at home. To support the main activity, which is creating a travel itinerary and a dialogue, the students make a collage. And you can see one in the photo. And you can see that the student chose Vancouver. They label it with information that the teacher provides, or they find information on the internet. And from that, create a day trip itinerary, like the one pictured here. Then the students adapt the dialogue from their textbook by inserting authentic information from the itinerary. Now, since the students were unable to meet synchronously, Wally had them practice with family members or other students, and then they sent in the recording of the dialogue with their written work as evidence. Does this assignment include critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication, the 4 C's of 21st century learning skills? How could we design it to allow for even more input? Let's think about that. Allowing students to choose the location can offer more motivation. Perhaps they have dreamed of visiting Machu Picchu or the Egyptian pyramids. You could group students together by regions or destinations to build in some collaboration. Also, be sure to highlight specific vocabulary so that it challenges students to focus on their writing. You can provide a rubric. Students could also write journal entries about a trip they took with their family and use the past tense. With the rubric, you could require that they include a certain number of days in their journal. Now, Cindy, you have a couple of great resources that could also enhance this activity.
Yes, thanks, Wendy. I remembered this website, Enchanted Learning. They provide sort of themed word lists. In this case, they have a vocation vocabulary word list. And another website that I really love is called languageguide.org. It also has categories of words that students can use, such as this example says landscapes. So all the vocabulary here would describe some of the environmental features of a location. I know they also have a category called travel. It gives details about modes of transportation. So I think it's important you could ask students to identify 10 new words, and they could decide what those words are. And they can choose from any of these lists, and they would have to include those in their presentation. So you can share websites with students, but then expect them to do the research into each one. Which one provides better ideas for their project? languageguide.org is particularly helpful because it pronounces the words for students, and then it offers a listening and speaking challenge. You can see here these pink boxes indicate that. So you could ask students to think critically about their own skills. Is this website better for them than Enchanted Learning for their learning needs? Let them decide that themselves. So now let's go back to have Wendy tell us more about another teacher.
Great. This is Mauricio from Morelia. He says that distance learning helps families to work together to achieve students' learning goals. He finds that parents have become much more involved in their children's schoolwork during the closures. Let's look at an activity that was particularly motivating for his students during this time. It's called Rooms in My House. This is how Mauricio structured the activity. First, he sent out the task by email. It included instructions, a video link of the grammar, a list of vocabulary, and 5 example structures that he wrote. As you can see from the picture, students wrote past tense sentences about what different family members did in each room of the house. Now, since we are spending the majority of time in our houses now, the students wrote some personal sentences like, I watch TV in my mother's bedroom because my TV is broken. They sent in a photo of their work and recorded themselves reading the sentences. Now let's see how we could amplify or transform this task with some more technology. So students could narrate a visual tour of their house, perhaps with some other family members involved. As you know, many realtors have some virtual home tours that could also be narrated by the students. After watching those, the classmates could ask about the features of the home. And Cindy, I know you had another idea.
Yes, I found this website called SketchUp, and I thought students could use it to design their own home that might require them to include a blueprint type document. So they can use this SketchUp website or other websites to do that. They would present their designs, and classmates might be required to ask them one question. I also think it's important during presentation that listeners are also required to do something. In this case, maybe listeners would be asked to track information such as the number of bedrooms or bathrooms that they have designed in their house. Or they could interview a friend or family member living in the US and ask them to describe their house. So I know in a previous webinar, we talked about the idea of differentiating, that you can differentiate by process, by content, or by product. So this is a way to offer a variety of products to show their learning for this particular task about designing a house and looking at different rooms in your house. Be sure to provide a rubric for work too, which I will demonstrate in the next slide. So maybe you again would require that all students need to include 10 words about parts of the house. For students interested in interior design or architecture, they can be very specific terms like flow or composition or balance. And other students can use more basic words like window, kitchen, door, or floor. And notice that this choice board has multiple opportunities for students to use online research skills and navigate different kinds of technology, tasks that use their critical thinking skills and creativity. Assign a reflection assignment after they have submitted their final product. Reflection is really important. Ask them to explain why they chose the task and then why they chose the resources to support it. Reflection is a powerful tool for building some of those character traits, such as initiative and flexibility and leadership. Gets students, particularly our adolescent students, thinking about why they do the things they do and what are the outcomes. Here's a chance to also point out how each of them will have a different perspective not right or wrong, about what's the best way to show their knowledge. So along with the choice board options, you'll want to include a rubric. Rubrics help us as teachers, as well as our students, be organized by outlining the expectations we have for a project or an assignment. So you can see this on the left column. Over here, these are the expectations for the rubric, that they had a beginning, middle, and end. They used pictures, drawings, and props, that they looked at the audience. So this is a basic rubric geared towards very young learners, but it can be adapted for use with second language learners like our students. So the expectations for the presentation are on the left, and then across the top are the different levels of accomplishment. In this case, a smiling face just means I'm still learning this one. 2 smiles says, yes, sometimes I remember to do this. And 3 smiles say, I almost always do it. I'm always looking at my audience. So let's see what this would look like for higher levels of English ability. It's the same aspect. We see the categories that are being assessed along the left: explanation of ideas and information, organization, your eye and body language, your voice. And then across the top, we have the different standards: below standard, approaching standard, and at standard. But you can see this is a lot more text heavy. So if I were to use this, I might even go in and change some of the wording on this. So rubrics provide structure, but they still allow for creativity. And there will be a link to this website that provides these rubrics in the resources at the end of our presentation. All right, Wendy.
Oh, well, the third dedicated teacher. Okay, so let's look at 2 activities that engaged his middle school English students: weather podcasts and video conferencing with native speakers. Abram broke down the task into 7 steps. First, they had some reading input that gave them important weather vocabulary and grammar. Then they also got input by listening to different styles of weather reports. Next, they had the opportunity to write a real script, and they got feedback from their teacher. Lastly, they recorded their own podcasts with Vocaroo or Spreaker Studio. Spreaker Studio adds sound effects to record their podcasts, and then they shared the recording with each other in their group. What 21st century learning skills and global competencies are targeted when students synthesize real information and apply it to their own context with practical communication tech tools? And Abram focuses a lot on communication and having his students reach out into the world for real interactors via Zoom or Google Meet. His conferences involved 3 stages: before, during, and after. Before the task, the students had to research information about the speaker and then prepare their questions. Students submitted their questions via WhatsApp, and the class could give feedback and corrections. Involving students in their own learning process, which is a reflective practice, sets them up for future success. Now, during the task, of course, as they were asking, they were also taking notes and recording the information in their notebooks for their report. So afterwards, they would write their report, turn it in, and also reflect together on how the conference went and how they could improve for future conferences. Now, this activity hits on two key areas of the global competence frameworks: collaboration and communication. Now let's hear what a couple of middle school and high school students have to say about their experiences with online learning. This is Carlota, a middle school student. She says that she likes the fact that we become more dynamic than when we were in school. She also told me that she likes to listen to English from school. And learn. Music, clothes, and making a TikTok. A music close. See the next slide. Okay, here we go. Thank you. A music close is a classic activity that I'm happy to see is still very motivating for. First of all, the easiest way is to provide multiple choice to words you would like your students to distinguish between. So if you look in the second line, for example, it could be my best suit, my best shoes, or my best shirt. They can either write the correct word in their notebook or annotate it by circling what they heard on the virtual whiteboard. Another simple way to structure this is to give the lines out of order, after which your students can number them using the same annotation tools. For further scaffolding, you can take out more or fewer words and have the students fill them in. Now, in Carlota's synchronous class, her English teacher paused the song and had them say the missing words aloud to this very familiar song. The students could have also compared their answers in a breakout room as well. Of course, you would also want to have them sing along or perhaps get the karaoke version to hear the students sing. Sorry. What do you think? How does this tie into 21st century framework or the global competencies framework? Okay, as you probably know or don't know, TikTok is very popular among teenagers and could be a way for students to practice their app looks like. If you don't know already, TikTok is a social media site where people post these videos are easy to load and gather quite a following. Now, some popular ways to use it are to put songs and shows and movies. Now, I have to admit, Cindy and I had no idea about how to use this before. Webinar, but we packed last weekend to an account and explore the teaching process together. So, it'll be motivating for your students, and if it's motivating for them, we'll be able to make a difference. So let's get Carlota's TikTok. She created a scene from the to our global framework. Okay.
Where's Bubbles?
She's probably upstairs combing her hair so she'll be the prettiest girl at the party. I'm gonna be the prettiest girl at the party.
Okay. Well, and I asked her to do this, but how could we use this in our classes since it is so motivating? Well, we thought she could first talk about a favorite song, show, or movie and post a video explaining why she loved it on Flipgrid for others to comment on. She can then use a funny scene or favorite scene to act out. Then I might have her write out the lines from the scene and turn them in for feedback. I think I would also have her pick the lines collectively and dramatically with classmates and perhaps have her send in an audio with their real voices. Then, of course, we want her to do a TikTok just like this one, act out the scene. So it would also be interesting to see the differences with their real voice and with the TikTok. And we also thought it'd be an interesting topic to accompany a book study, since many popular books are turned into movies. So students could choose key scenes from a book that are in the movie. They could do their TikTok and then explain why they chose that, and we could put them in order. What do you think about that? Give us a thumbs up if you like the idea. All right, let's look. Let's hear from Isiah. He's a high school student. He says, I discovered a new way to learn. We can do everything on the internet. Although he looks forward to going back to school, he loves the time that online learning saves him by not having to commute and be in classes all day. Now, Isiah's remote learning took place asynchronously on his smartphone. He told us, though, about a face-to-face activity that he thought was motivating and fun. And Cindy and I want to bring it online. It's called Blind Directions. His one was blinded and the other one had to guide them back to the room using directions in English only. Let's see how we can take this into an online class. So while looking at an online map like this, students could take turns giving directions from point A to point B. Either students could follow the map with the annotation tools or simply listen and state the endpoint. This map is from the website liveworksheets.com, which also provides interactive sentences that the students can complete online. Now, we just heard from some American teenagers in Mexico. Let's now hear from some in the United States. So, do you think it's motivating for teenagers to communicate with other teens around the world? Then American Teens Talk, a great resource for you on AmericanEnglish.ca. The U.S. Department of showcased this a bit on last session in the series book. It features 30 print accompanied by an audio file with length. Also has a glossary and end of the book you will find to external resource is StoryCorps. On the next slide. StoryCorps with this, we can also go beyond our classrooms and into the world. Its mission to preserve and share humanity's stories in order to build connections between people and create a more just, passionate world. Now, how's that for 24th century skills and global competencies? There are tons of real interviews for your students to listen to. For example, there's one about a sister who interviews her 13-year-old brother and a daughter who interviews her mom. Now, on the next slide, we have a possible task to use these interviews. Now, remember the one on video conferencing from Abram as well. So on the next slide, we can see perhaps we can assign a final project like a presentation comparing perspectives among teenagers. We can have them draw a storyboard, do comprehension activities, write comparison essay, fill in the blank worksheets, and write their own interview questions in addition to those in the book. These are authentic ways to practice listening, but ways to gather information about different points of view and cultural practices. And both resources are rich sources of real language. Back to you, Cindy.
All right, thank you, Wendy. I think we're having some connection issues. I'm going to keep speaking. I hope everybody can hear me. I wanted to talk a little bit now about addressing the needs of some of the lowest level learners. How do we scaffold activities to their level and yet still challenge them? Well, critical thinking does not mean complicated or high level vocabulary and ideas. It means challenging students to use their knowledge in new ways. And this is exactly what we are asking students to do when they are learning to read. And too many teachers, I think, believe that middle school and high school students already know how to read. And in fact, some students, though, who are learning English as a foreign language aren't even introduced to English until their upper elementary or middle school years. And I know that it's true for my students that are all high school students. They definitely don't have some of the basic fundamental reading skills solidly in place. So let's look at a basic lesson for low-level learners who are still learning this skill of how to decode. So can your students do this? Spell their name? I find that my students, even after several years of English instruction, will still struggle to say the vowels correctly in particular. Those are so tricky between Spanish and English. So we can embed this letter practice into all of our lessons. You can just ask them to spell words when they provide answers to other tasks. So going back to that map activity where students were listening to the directions on a city map, if the answer turned out to be restaurant, then you could ask a student to spell it for you when they provided the answer. So the harder part is then sounding out the word. Do students know the sounds that the letters make in English? If they can't decode words, they can't progress to higher level reading skills. But we can teach this in age appropriate ways. Your students will be learning lots of vocabulary just listening to movies and songs, but will they recognize those words when they see them in print? If not, they lose a valuable chance to increase their vocabulary. So we have to teach students this skill so they will be able to advance to college level reading and writing tasks. So teach students to look for smaller words within a larger word. Can Carlos recognize and pronounce car when he is reading with a little bit of a different English pronunciation? But what about the words then bar or far or star? So this is a critical thinking task that teaches the fundamental reading skill of transferring letter sounds and word patterns to new words. There are many free assessment tools available on the internet to help you identify the reading needs of your students. So here is just one pre-assessment that you could give a student. So you're going to ask them to read these nonsense words. A nonsense word is the idea that it doesn't really exist in English. But if they are able to transfer their understanding of vowels and word patterns in English, then they won't have trouble speaking these nonsense words. So you could ask your students to read these words and record them on WhatsApp, or you could use that Vocaroo app that we mentioned earlier. So making sure that they do have that ability to take their knowledge and transfer it to other learning is really a vital skill. And there's a link to this decoding assessment that's in the resources at the end of our webinar. So let's take this skill now to a new level. Can you pronounce this word? Forget. Students need to see that this word is just two smaller words, for and get, and that makes it easy to pronounce, right? If they can see that this is not a new pronunciation task. So teaching its meaning can be done at the same time, but don't forget to focus on the decoding and the pronunciation aspects. So you can move into a harder challenge by teaching prefixes and suffixes. Students can use vocaroo.com again to send you some of their speaking assignments, whatever you assign to them. So let's look at this. What is the base word here? It's still the word forget. So can students see that the base word is still there? Help students see that the knowledge of one word can take them in many different directions. Can they see that there are now 3 words in this larger word? Can they tell you the meaning of that suffix able? Teaching students to break down words into smaller chunks and meaning is a very challenging critical thinking skill, yet it is vital to their ongoing reading abilities. And how about adding a prefix? Now it's a completely new word again. I found the idea unforgettable. Now, why are word parts so important? Well, beyond the connection to the learning of foundational reading skills, we can think about applying it to students' careers. So connect their English language study now to their college aspirations, for which our secondary level students are not that far off, right? So there are lots of lists already out there and worksheets available for the study of prefixes and suffixes. Students want to be a dentist or a nurse or a doctor, go ahead and teach them some of the root words and suffixes connected to medical terminology. Or maybe a student was really interested in that weather podcast that the previous teacher did with their students, and now they're thinking about studying astronomy or meteorology. I'll go ahead and let them start learning some of those words they're going to need to know in college. So how can you make the teaching of word parts engaging? Well, here's an example. I always loved learning about compound words, taking 2 words and putting them together to form a 3rd word. So you could challenge students to find compound words or make up their own. What a great creative task that would be. So make up a new compound word and draw a picture of it, or write a description of its use. You could teach them how a word changes depending on the part of speech. That's what's happening here in this bottom worksheet. So the word create is a verb, but if I change the suffix, I can turn it into an adjective. Now it's creative. Or what if I added a different suffix, creation, and now it's a noun? So both of these worksheets that you see on the screen right now are available in that liveworksheets.com website that we've mentioned several times. It's free and it's an interactive way to teach, and you can build a lesson around the use of their materials. Let me talk just a little bit more about that idea, because we know that planning engaging and challenging lessons can be so time consuming, but I often use this skill of back mapping. So I find a website or a content that I want to teach, and I move backwards. So what do I need students to know in order to be able to finish this particular worksheet? So I can use the images and the ideas in new ways, but all leading towards that final objective. In this case, it was creating compound words, or the pronunciation of them. So in this example, I could print out the compound word worksheet that we just saw, and we could make virtual flashcards. I could turn it into a vocabulary lesson and a manipulative activity. I might assign small groups of students to do this in a breakout room, or I could send it in a text to students that only have access to a cell phone. I could use a Google Doc shared with a group, and students could take turns moving these text boxes around to create and practice saying new words. Other students could decide if it's a real word or not, or they could make up a use for the word, and they could use it in a sentence. So there are so many resources already out there for us just to tap into. This is another one I want to share with you. Nearpod. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. Nearpod is something that's accessible through the cell phone for students, but teachers could use it through their computer, as this image shows. So it's an app. It allows students to share their ideas at the same time from their individual cell phones. You have the ability to make polls or open-ended questions, and Nearpod already has lots of ready-made lessons for you. In this case, it's a lesson about prefixes and suffixes. But Nearpod also gives you the ability to create your own lessons. So at this point, I'm going to turn you back over to Wendy for a few more important pieces of information.
Thank you, Cindy. So we would like to conclude this session by looking at the concept of blended learning. So right now, we know we're in an unusual situation where there is little balance between online and remote learning. Between online remote learning and face-to-face interactions. Much of the work that students are doing at home is filling in worksheets or doing exercises in their textbooks. The teacher is, most teachers are not able to set up projects and dynamics which lead to deeper learning. However, let's take a look at what the future of learning English might look like in our schools in the upcoming year. There are a few things that we have definitely learned from the shutdown, and that is that technology is here to stay, and the role of the teacher in teaching is vital. We think to look to if they haven't already for the future of learning. The learning, as you can see here, comes from Wikipedia. It's an approach that combines online educational materials and opportunities for online interaction with face-to-face classroom methods. As the name says, it is blended or balanced. Technology does not replace the teacher, and the teacher is not merely there to upload assignments on a learning management system. Let's look at the next slide. It's all about balance. So as you heard from the teachers and students that we highlighted today and in previous sessions, there have been some advantages to remote teaching, such as increased parental involvement, one-on-one attention, and a focus on all agree that there needs to be a balance. According to an article from Edutopia, cited here, we need to capitalize on the advantages of online resources and skills that we as teachers bring to good teaching. Now, the balance must be between what online media does best and what teachers bring to the table. Which activities are better done outside of the home on a flexible schedule and individually, and what begs for collaboration, more structure, and face-to-face interaction. But this needs to be well planned out and accessible for all. Now, this is what the 21st century classroom could really look like. On the next slide, we have a few resources. So here's the resources we mentioned in the webinar. Check them out, and Jose Manuel has added more to the chat. Well, back to you, Ruth. Thank you so much.
Thank you both, Wendy and Cindy, for this session on teaching middle and high school students online. Judging by the comments we saw today and all the hearts and likes, people enjoyed what you had to share with them. So over the last few sessions, you've seen contributions from several Mexican teachers, and we're extremely grateful to them for sharing what they know. We are sure, though, that you, our participants, also have great ideas and tips to share, and we'd love it if you did. So please, if you have something you'd like us to feature, write up your idea and submit it along with a photo or two of you in action. Send it to the address on the slide. Together with our panelists, we'll review them, and maybe you'll see it in an upcoming webinar or on the Relo Mexico Facebook page. We'd like to thank you, everybody, today for your lively engagement and your participation. We hope that you will continue to share what you've learned today through social media with your colleagues after this session ends. As we've mentioned in earlier sessions, a watch party is a really good way to do that. And the diagram on the slide will show you how to do that. You start a post. When the box pops up, you'll notice 3 dots at the bottom. That will give you more options. You'll click on Watch Party, and then you choose this video and publish. At that point, your friends will receive notification to view the recording with you, and you can discuss it in the comments. So our next session will be led by Heather once again. And is it Cindy who's going to tell us about the next session?
Sure. Heather's going to talk to us about the ways to engage young adults and university students online and give us some information about research and other issues that might be more specific to this age group. So we hope you'll join us for that session.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, everyone, for your patience today. I think the weather had a little bit of an impact on the transmission. I hope that if you didn't get everything, the slides helped you make it through the rough spots, and we'll hope for better weather on Thursday. So please come back again on Thursday, June 25th for our next session. Until then, stay home, stay safe. Bye-bye, everybody.